Hello, welcome back to the channel. Today I have a review for Marvel Studios' Eternals. This film has had a very mixed reception. It currently has the lowest score on Rotten Tomatoes of any MCU movie. I think it's at around 51%. The only rotten MCU movie in Marvel Studios history, which is crazy to me because this is, to me, not even close to being the worst MCU movie. Obviously, I've only seen it once. I've seen every other MCU movie multiple times. But I liked this movie. I understand why it's going to have mixed responses. I understand why it's going to be a bit of a mixed bag for some people. It was a mixed bag for me, but the positive outweighed the negative, and I think for a lot of people the negative is going to outweigh the positive. So let me get into some specifics here, but I promise I won't spoil anything about the movie. In terms of the characters, which is a huge part of any MCU movie, I liked all of the characters. There weren't any that I disliked. A few of my favorites were Kingo, played by Kumail Nanjiani, because I thought he was really funny, and Druig, played by Barry Keoghan, because I thought his character was complex and had a lot of interesting internal conflict going on. Like I said, I liked all the other characters, but there really wasn't one that stood out to me and that I fell in love with the way I did with Yelena in Black Widow or Shang-Chi in The Legend of the Ten Rings. They were all just sort of good. The acting, though, was great. The entire cast is really good in the movie. There were some characters that felt less important. Angelina Jolie's character, as well as Ma Dong-seok's character, they had a subplot that didn't feel very important that I probably would have cut. And there are also a couple villains in the movie. I'm not going to spoil anything, like I said, but there's at least one of those that I probably would have cut from the film. So, talking about the story, I thought the structure of the film was a little bit messy. I'll talk about that more in a second, but I thought the story itself was really interesting. I thought it lent itself well to a lot of interesting questions and interesting themes about humanity, and there are a lot of interesting ethical dilemmas throughout the movie that these characters are put in, and I think that the way those things are handled is really interesting and really different from things that we've seen in Marvel movies before. But in terms of the structure, the movie does have a lot of flashbacks, and it jumps location quite a bit. That's always tricky for me. I feel that I would have preferred if they were able to streamline those things so that we don't jump around as much, just for the sake of pacing. And speaking of pacing, we're still assembling the team about an hour and a half into the movie, which feels a little drawn out to me. I liked the third act, but it definitely felt a little third acty at times in certain ways. So I think you know what I mean by that. It just feels sort of like a Marvel third act when the rest of the movie felt very original. But like I said, I liked the third act. There's still a lot of interesting character stuff going on, and that's really what the movie centers around, at least for me, the relationships between the Eternals. And most of those, I think, are really interesting, aside from a few that I thought could have been streamlined. Like I mentioned, the one with Angelina Jolie, it didn't feel connected to the larger story and felt a little bit boring to me. I don't want to say what's going on in that storyline, but I think you'll know what I mean when you see it. On a technical level, the movie is beautiful. The visual effects and the costume design are both great. Chloe Zhao directed the film, so of course it's going to be beautifully shot. And yeah, it looks really good. I loved all of the characters' powers. They all felt very different and very well defined. I especially appreciated Makari's power. I think her name's Makari, because she's a fast-running character, a speedster, whatever you want to call her. But they didn't do the slow-mo thing, which it works for Quicksilver. It's a little overdone with the Flash, in my opinion. But in this movie, she just moves really fast, and that really gives you a sense of just how fast she's really going when it's not in slow motion. So overall, as a Marvel movie, first of all, the cast is great. It's a wonderfully diverse cast. The movie's being praised for that, and I think it deserves that praise. I think that representation is handled really well in this movie. Chloe Zhao is a really good director, obviously, so the movie looks good. It's a very different Marvel experience, and it's going to be very divisive for fans, I feel like. It sets up a lot of new stuff for the MCU, things that are definitely going to come into play later on, but it doesn't really tie into any existing plot threads. It doesn't incorporate existing characters. So that's something that will either feel refreshing or a little unrewarding, because it feels detached in some ways from Phase 4. I do respect the movie for being different and taking risks, which, like I said, I respect it for, versus something like Black Widow that felt a little safe to me. But it's such a vast movie trying to do so much stuff that I feel like not all of it works, not all of it pays off. And but I'd rather a movie take big risks and not have them all pay off than to not take any risks and have it be okay. That's my personal preference. I respect that the movie sort of went big, and a lot of it does work. Like I said, there are just some things that don't quite stick the landing, and certain things, because there are so many characters, certain characters that don't get as much time as I think they needed to have a full and compelling story. For me, the positives outweighed the negatives, like I said, but it's hard for me to say what that's going to look like for you. I do recommend you see it. I think it's a well-made movie. I think it's a good movie. I think it's a good Marvel movie. It's different. And it is going to have an impact on things going forward in the MCU. So if you care about keeping up with the MCU, then of course I recommend it for that reason as well. Thank you so much for tuning into my review of Eternals. I hope to be posting more on this channel. Also follow me on TikTok, at Jake Zing, JakeZingg, because I post a lot of movie news and reviews there too, or at least I'm trying to going forward. So thank you, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.